What's up guys? If you're looking for a clean and dynamic timed XP reward system for your Fortnite map, this video is for you. So as always, all of the code and assets used in this video will be available for free in the Discord link down below, as well as on my Patreon. Let's get into it. So in a pretty well fresh project here, the first thing we're going to want to do is make our material for our progress bar. So we're going to just open up our content drawer, create a new folder, name it something like materials, open that up. And then you're going to want to create a material. So you can just right click, material, name it something you'll remember. We'll just do progress bar in this case. And then open it up. So since this is going to be on our user interface, we're going to need to change some settings on it. So in our material domain, we're going to switch that to a user interface. And then for the blend mode, we're going to set it to translucent. So then you can have some transparency. I'll start by just showing you what nodes to put down, and then I'll actually explain what they're doing afterwards, if you care for that. So starting off, we'll want a texture coordinate node. Just place that down, and then from that node, you can drag out a mask node, or a component mask node, and open that dropdown, and we're going to set it to the R channel. Then with that, drag that out again, and we're going to take a step node, and you can cut that link and set it to the X. Then you're going to hold S and left click to place down a parameter. Name it something like progress, something you'll remember to set the actual parameter later when we're controlling how full to make the progress bar. And you can just drag that into the Y component of your step and give it some kind of default value so we can see it, something like 0.5. And then you can just drag that step node into an inversion node. So it's a 1-. That'll just flip the values. And you can drag that right into your opacer. And this will control the progress of the actual bar. Then what we're going to want to do is grab a color blend node, or a 3-color blend node, and you're going to place some colors. So if you hold down 3 on your keyboard and just left click, you can place a couple colors, and then you can drag those into your color blend. And to actually make this into a gradient, what you'll need is a linear gradient node. Just place one of those down here. We're going to want our gradient to go left to right, so we're going to use the U gradient of this and just plug that into the alpha. And then if you right click here and you preview this node, you won't really see anything because your colors are black. So choose some colors. We're going to go with a pink to, I don't know, purple, and then maybe like a light blue. And you can see that there on the side. I'll change this a little bit to make it a little nicer. Brighter, something like that looks nice. And then you can plug that into your final color. And stop reviewing it. And here you can see this is our progress bar that we're going to be using. And you can change your progress value to see that it will fill up as you do the values. It only takes values between 0 and 1 just to fill it out on a normalized scale here. And yeah, that's pretty much it for setting up the actual nodes. Alright, with the material done, the next thing we're going to do is create our widget for this. So we're just going to do it through a blueprint. So go ahead and make another folder, just name it something like widgets. Open that folder up, right click again, go user widget, widget blueprint, and just create a user widget. Name it something you'll remember, W underscore, like XP meters, something like that. Open it up. And in here, you're going to want a canvas panel, so you just drag one of those out. And we're going to do this using an overlay and some stack boxes. So you can just drag an overlay into your canvas panel here. And we're just going to center it now just for ease of working with it. And then set the size to content to be true. First thing you'll probably want is an image. So this is going to be our background. And just set it to be black with like 0.75 alpha. Just a little transparent. And then set the draw as to be a rounded box. So it's going to be fully circular, which is not really ideal. So change the rounding type to be fixed radius instead of half height. And give it some rounding. We'll just do 10 for now. It's a little small. So go up to the image size, change it to something like 400 by maybe 80. Maybe a little wide, 300 by 80. No, 400 is fine. And that's going to be our background. So then we're going to want some stack boxes here. So you can throw one of those into the overlay. This is going to be our vertical one. So scroll and find your orientation and set it to be vertical. And you can set it to be fill. The first thing you want to throw in there is a text block. This is going to say something like every 3 minutes in our example. You can have it say whatever you'd like, really. Another thing we'll do is in the stack box is set some padding. So you can just say like 5, just so it's not touching the border. Okay, so after you've got your text, the next thing you'll do is just throw an image into your stack box. Make sure it's still set to fill. And you're going to just drag on your material that you created. So you just open up your drawer and just throw that onto there. So that'll be your meter that you're going to be using. And you can also set that to be rounded as you'd like. So just draw as rounded box, and then you can change the radius to be fixed again and just set it to something like 5. So that'll round it out, which you can see here. So we're going to just change the size to just be something like 20, maybe 20, and then just set it to fill the space. So the next thing we'll do is you're going to want to wrap your stack box in another stack box. So to do that, you can just right click your stack box and then go wrap with, and then stack box. That'll shrink it up a bit. So you can go to the outer one or the inner one here and just set to fill. And then you're going to drag an image into the outer stack box, and this is going to be the XP icon. So we don't have that yet, so we're going to go ahead and create another folder here, just name it textures, and you'll just import that from the Discord or the Patreon. Alright, with your icon imported, you can just click on your image that you dragged in and just drag the texture right into the brush. It's probably going to be way too big, so just make it something like 50 by 50. We're going to scale it up using the actual transform, just to get it in a position that we like. So one thing is that your progress bar is going to be taking up a little too much space, so if you go and select on your image and give it some padding on the right, you want it to not take up so much space, so like something like 50. And then go back to your XP icon here, and scroll down to the transform section so you can actually scale this up and move it around without affecting the layout. And that's ideally what we're going to do here, so probably something like, okay, 30 is a little big, maybe like 3 by 3. It's a nice good size, and it covers it up there. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the visuals. We're going to need some bindings here now, just to actually control the menu itself. So in your variables, go ahead and add a new one. Just call it something like progress. This is going to control how full the meter is as time goes on. So you can just set it to be a float value, accept that one. And we're going to create a second one here to control the text that we see here. So we can just name it just literally text, that's fine, and set it to be a message, and accept that. So you can click on your text, and you can go down and find your text. Click on this little binding icon and select text. And what that'll do is you can just set your text through Verse now, and what we're going to use that for is to dynamically set this 3 digits so that we can have different timings if we like. And then for the second one, you can just click on your progress bar image and go ahead and add widget. And then in this first dropdown, you can go ahead and select brush. And then in the second one, go conversion function, and then set scalar parameter on the brush. Select that. And the progress, or the parameter name that we set in the material was just called progress. So you can just change that to say progress, and then bind the value to that progress variable that we set earlier. And that is it for functionality of this widget. I'd say we probably want this not in the direct center of the screen. So go ahead and select your overlay, and then go to anchors, click this drop down, hold Control Shift, and then click on the right one. It'll move it over and set the alignment properly. It's gonna be going off the screen a little bit. So we can move it over using position, just drag it to a position you like, something that's not touching the side of the screen. And that should be good. And another thing, if this is too big for your liking and you don't want to have to go through and change all these random size values, you can just go into your overlay, the top level container, and scroll down to transform, and you can set the scale using these instead. So you can scale the entire widget without having to manually go through each one and changing their sizes. We're just going to keep it big for now. You can adjust it to your liking if you find it necessary. Alright, so then save, compile, and we're going to write some code here for controlling this thing and awarding the XP to the player. So you can just close out of both of these. And you can go here into your Verse and Verse Explorer. In your top right here, go right click on the content folder, create new Verse file. I'm going to name this something like timed reward manager device, and then just create that. That open, you can click this button to open your VS Code. Alright, And VS Code, head over to your time reward manager. You can clean up this file if you want, just erase all this garbage it comes with. Write a block to prevent that from throwing an error. In our device here, the first thing we're going to want is our accolades device to actually award the XP. So you can set up an editable here. Just name it like accolade, and it's of type accolades device, and initialize that. And we'll set that through the editable field once we actually place the device down. Set up another field here that is going to be minutes, something like that. We're using 3 minutes as our example. And this is going to control like how long it takes the timer to actually complete. And we'll also want our spawner devices to, so we can place those spawners of type array of player spawner device. Initialize that as an empty array. We'll set that through the device editables later. So first we'll sub our spawners to a spawn function. So to do that, you just do for spawner in spawners do. So this is going to iterate over each of the spawners that you have in the array. And for each of those spawners, you're going to subscribe to the onSpawn event. Spawn event. Yep. Subscribe. And we'll make a function here in a second called onSpawn. And that takes in a type, an agent. And there we go. So we have our spawn function and our onBegin function. So since this is something that's going to happen over time, we're going to need to handle this in a separate function. So we can write handle menu, and it'll take in, let's take in a player so we don't have to cast it here. And it's going to suspend, which means it's going to happen over time. And let's just block that out for now. Okay, then in your onSpawn function, you're going to first cast your agent to a player. So you can do that just by typing like, setting your new variable player equal to player, or the type player of agent. So that'll cast your agent to be a player if they are an agent, or if they are a player. Then from there, you can just spawn your handle menu function and pass in your player that you just casted. But there's one other thing that you'll need to keep in mind. So right now this is going to be running every single time a player spawns, which is not really ideal. So if somebody dies and comes back, it'll spawn a second one. So it'll be tracking their XP twice, which is not great. And it'll happen every other time they respawn too. So we'll need a way of tracking who's being watched right now. So we can do that using a map. So we can say player tracker is of type map from player as the key and then a void as the value, because we don't actually care about what it's tracking, we just want to know who's being tracked, and just set that to a type map. And so what we'll do here is we'll say if there's a player, and then we'll say not player tracker at player. So what this is saying, like if they're not in this tracker, we're going to set them to be in the tracker, and just set them to the void. So it's saying if they don't exist in the tracker already, add them to the tracker and then start watching their menu. So then if they ever die again, it'll try to see like if they're not in the tracker, but they will be. So this will fail and then this spawn won't happen again. And of course, when you're adding things to a map, you want to clean it up later. So you could say on leave. So this is a function that'll run whenever a player leaves the game. And what that'll do is just set the player tracker to player tracker dot remove key, which we're going to have a function here that I'll just paste in. It's just a utility that removes a key from a map, and in our case it'll be removing the player that left the game. So here's our remove key function. So what it does, it takes a generic map where t is a subtype of a comparable, so you're saying it has to be a value that can be compared, which is essentially what a map key is. It needs to be able to be compared, and then it has a value of type u, which is just arbitrary, we pass it in, and then dot remove key, which takes in a value of type t, which is our key. And so what it does is pretty much just loops over each key and value pair in the map, and then if that key is not equal to the key we're trying to remove, put it back in the map, and then just return that new map. So that'll handle leaving. And we need to actually subscribe that too. So we'll say get playspace in our onBegin function, dot player removed event dot subscribe, and then on leave. And this needs parentheses here. So that'll handle cleanup once your players leave, just so your map doesn't get filled up with hundreds of players as people leave and join. Okay, so we'll write our handler function now. So the first thing we'll need is to know how many seconds we are going to be counting for. We do that just by multiplying our minutes by 60. And we're going to want to erase here. So what erase does is you can give it two different expressions, and then whenever one of them finishes, it will cancel the other one. So what we're going to be using this for is to be tracking players who are leaving. So we're not going to want to count somebody's XP after they've left the game. There's just no point in that. So what that'll look like is we're going to loop. We're going to get our play space dot player removed event dot await. So what this is saying is just wait for that event to happen, and once it happens, continue this line of code here. And we're going to actually want to capture this value. So we're going to say lever is equal to that. And then we're going to compare this lever to the player that we're watching. So we'll say if lever is equal to player, then break. So you can see it's complaining right now. It's just because we only have one expression in our race. We need two of them for it to be a race. Otherwise, this is just a loop on its own. So what this is saying, so every time somebody leaves the game, we're going to check if the person who left is the player whose menu we're looking at. And if it is, then cancel the rest. And so for actually controlling the progress bar, we'll need a second loop here. And in this one, we're just going to map a for loop for I is 0 to our seconds that we had earlier. And it's going to sleep for 1 second for each second that we have. Okay, so this is all good. We're going to need one more part before we can actually do something with our timer that we just made here. Okay, so we can create our widget that we made earlier. So this widget equals widgets, which is the folder that we put it in, .w_xp meter, and just initialize that. And then we're going to need our player's UI. So you can just get that by doing player UI is equal to get player UI and pass it to player. Then with that player UI, we're going to do player UI.add widget and that widget. So that'll add the progress bar and the XP icon and such to the player's screen. Then now that we have that, we can actually do something with our timer and our widget. So you remember that we created some parameters in this. We have progress and we have text. So for starters, we can set our text to be something useful. So we can do set widget.text equals. We're going to need another utility function here, which I will just paste for your convenience. So scroll back to the top, paste in to two message functions, so it just converts a string to a message. So it'll localize it to the player's native language that they have set in Fortnite. So we're going to set this to be toMessage of a string that says every, and then you can use some curly braces to put in a value here. So we're going to say minutes, 3 mins, exclamation point. So this is the dynamic part that I was talking about. So you can set this minute editable to be whatever you want, and then the menu will update accordingly, and it'll also count that long as well. So now with the actual timer, what we'll do is we want our seconds as a float as well. We're going to do that once in the beginning here, so we don't have to do it every iteration. So seconds float is just seconds times 1.0, so it's just turning it into a float by multiplying it by 1.0. And that's going to be useful up here, where we're going to be setting the widget.progress equal to, press here, I times 1.0, divided by seconds float. And this is going to give us a value between 0 and 1 based on how much time has passed. So I is counting from 0 to how many seconds there are. So when I is, say, 10, it's going to divide 10 by how many seconds there are in total, and that's going to give us a percentage of how full the progress bar needs to be, and it's going to set that in our widget. And that is going to happen as many seconds as there are, and it will fill up the progress bar, and eventually it'll hit 1. And then once that happens, you'll be outside again. And this is where we're going to award our XP. So we just named it accolade, so we can just paste that here, accolade.award, and then just pass the player. And that's pretty well it. So every time your timer counts up to the number of seconds there are, it will award XP, and then it'll just start over again. And you don't have to worry about canceling this because this loop here handles that. So you can be sure that when the player leaves the game, it will stop counting this for that player. And that is pretty much it. So we'll head back over to our UEFN. And we'll go verse, build verse code. Go back into your root and drag out this device that you just made. It's got a couple parameters that we're going to set up. So go into the Fortnite content and grab devices. Just search up accolade, throw one down. You'll need a little bit of settings here. You can name it if you want. Choose how much XP it should be. And you'll want it to be triggering player only, just so these are individual per plan. And then you can just use the dropper and stuff like that in your time reward device. And also don't forget to set your spawners. And I'm pretty sure that's it. So let's load up a session and see how it looks. Alright, session loaded. You just start the game. Take a look at what we've got. And there you go. Widget is on the screen. And the progress bar is slowly filling up. We'll let this run. Alright, and there you go. XP awarded at 3 minutes, and then the timer restarts. And this will just go on as long as the player is in your lobby. Alright, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you guys want to see next. And yeah, see you in the next one.